Look. Who's that? Do you see that? Do you see that guy? Huh? Say hi. Say hi. Hi. This is a little Apollo.
Are you ready to come with Grammy?
Yeah, he's sitting by Grandpa. Oh, yeah, he wants to get his whole hands on the computer. Yeah, you want to get that computer.
All right, come on, Apollo.
All right.
Let's go get some lunch.
Go get Grandma. Hey, folks. How's it going? Thank you for joining me today. This is going to be my last live before Christmas. I'm going to take the weekend and Christmas off, and then I'll probably do one more after that on my channel about what I do for goal setting, because it has to do with the topic of one of my books, and so we'll talk about that. Somebody said, will my whole family be able to join me for Christmas? Kind of. I mean, not all at once, but we will get to see everybody in the family over the Christmas holidays. We've already been with my son and daughter-in-law who live in Armenia. We brought them over to Israel to have an early Christmas with them last week. And then we've got almost everybody else here except my son Joseph, and we're going to go see him on Christmas Day or the day after, something like that. So we had some of our gift giving already because the kids wanted to make use of some of the games and stuff they were getting for Christmas. We just catch as catch can around here, do the best we can. So I want to talk about the 5 most memorable moments of a U.S. Army Ranger. If you don't know, I spent 4 years in the Army Rangers back in the 1980s and 90s, and it was a very pivotal time in my life. You can imagine that being a part of one of the most elite units in the U.S. military would be impactful on your life, and it certainly was. And I want to talk about some of the most memorable moments and why, and kind of the impact they had on my life. And I want to show some pictures to go along with it. So here's young Chuck Holton as an E2 private right after I got to the unit, the 3rd Ranger Battalion, you can see there at Fort Benning, Georgia. You can see that I don't have much on my sleeves or on my chest, just my airborne wings, my marksmanship badge, which I don't even think was an expert at that time. And that's about it. That's the only thing I had earned so far. But getting into the Ranger unit is not just a simple matter of signing up. We had to go through a 3-week course called RIP at that time, Ranger Indoctrination Program. Now it's called RASP or ROPE, depending on if you're an officer or not. Well, they may actually have changed the name again and be calling it something else. But back then it was a 3-week course. It was basically just 3 weeks of misery. No, that was a E2 chevron, not a chevron, but just a one-stripe mosquito wings, they called it. So that 3-week course was three-week basically gut check to see if you had what it took physically to make it as a Ranger. And it was started with what we call the ballistic wake up on the first morning. They told us we were getting up at 5:45, but they actually came in about 2:45 and kicked in the door and started firing blanks out of a machine gun inside the barracks and throwing people out of windows and turning over bunks and screaming and hollering and stuff. Got us all out in the main square out in front of the old barracks there. It was the old airborne school barracks at Fort Benning. And put us in the, they call it the dying cockroach position, where you had to lay on your back on the ground with your head off the ground, your feet and your legs up in the air, straight up. And they said, okay, guys, we have to get rid of 70% of you at least before this is over. And so we're going to do everybody a favor and not draw this out. So day 1, moment 1, hour 1, you're going to stay in that position of the dying cockroach until half of you quit. Go. And We sat out there in the cold in our skivvies in that dying cockroach position. And if you let your head drop or let your arms down or your legs down or whatever, they would come in and say, "You're out. Bye. You're going up for the needs of the Army." And that meant you were probably going to go guard a concrete block somewhere in the Sinai or something. And so about half the guys quit right away. The 150 or so guys that started in our class in RIP, out of that 30 couple ended up actually graduating. And 39, I think, something like that, if I remember right, ended up graduating. And that's just because it was a constant constant physical gut check from day one for 3 weeks. And so by the time that young Ranger you see there was standing in front of the sign, I had already been through that and had been through airborne school and basic training, and that was it. So this was something like November of 1987. And I had just turned 18 years old right there. So anytime anybody says in this war in Israel that the 18-year-olds that they're arresting in the West Bank are children, I think back to my time as an 18-year-old and think I certainly was not a child at that point because I had already been through quite a bit. And an 18-year-old is very likely in our culture here in the United States, we think an 18-year-old is a boy because they still act like boys, because all they know how to do is pew, 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 pew. They're no good to society. But when I was 18 years old, I was already an Army Ranger in the United States military and had something to be proud of right there. But when I arrived to the unit, my misery was not over. I thought it would be, but I was wrong, because what happened was you get to your unit and now you're around a bunch of guys that have been there and done that. And they've been, living the life of an Army Ranger for quite some time. And now you're the new guy and you have to prove yourself to them before they're going to, trust you. And that was what I had to do right away. So this is my first field problem out on Fort Benning. This was like February of 1989 or 88, sorry. And it was like 28 degrees and the humidity out there was terrible. And I've never been so cold in my whole life. That was absolute misery. And I remember we'd have to spend the day, we'd have to dig a foxhole and spend a day laying in this foxhole. And then we'd do missions at night. And so here's my foxhole and my squad automatic weapon there. I had to hump around. And I sat in that foxhole and froze to death and ended up with frost nip on my toes. And we'd do missions all night long. I'd be miserable all day long. And this is about the time I started wondering, what have I gotten myself into? It was so painful and so miserable. And I had no idea what was going on. Nobody would tell me, they just get mad at me all the time because I wasn't where I was supposed to be, when I was supposed to be there. And I didn't understand anything. And I was so slow because I had not learned the art of being efficient with my movements and with planning ahead to what's going to happen next. And so, when the helicopter came in to drop us off, we were snapped in on the helicopter with a rope around our waist and snapped into a D ring on the helicopter. And so as we're coming in for landing on the helicopter, what's the next thing we're going to have to do? We're going to have to get out of the helicopter. And that means we're going to have to unsnap this D ring. Well, I was probably like most people, I didn't even think about that until it was time to do it. And so everybody else had thought ahead and had already unsnapped that D-Link. And so as soon as the skids touched the ground, man, we were out of that helicopter, or everybody else was, and they were off and running. And I was over there fumbling with my D-Ring in the dark and trying to figure out how to unscrew it. And my squad leader was just beside himself and was kicking me in the back end and yelling at me all the time. And I just thought, oh, that's absolutely terrible. So that was not a good time out there. And I was starting to wonder if I had made the right decision joining the Army Rangers. That's for sure out there. And that is a very memorable field problem just because I learned so much about myself. I would have never imagined up to that point that I would be capable of going 2 days without any food or going, living out in the freezing cold and being as miserable as I was and still functioning, of going with, less than 2 hours sleep a night for days on end. And that field problem taught me that I was capable. When I got done with that field problem, even though I'd already been through RIP, I'd already been through airborne school, that field problem taught me that I was capable of so much more than I actually thought I was. And, I think a lot of us, one of the reasons that I tell people, young men that I speak to today, that you need to be embracing hardship is that when you embrace hardship, you learn about yourself and learn what you're capable of. And so I learned a lot about what I was capable of on that field problem. That was one of my memorable moments. Now, let's go on to the next one. Next memorable moment was our first trip to Panama in 1988. This is about July of 1988. We went to Panama for training to the Jungle Warfare Training Center. And you can see skinny little Chuck Holton there at the mouth of the Chagres River, right at Fort San Lorenzo. And this is on a day we had off. But we spent some time out in the jungle there. We did helo casting into Fort Sherman Bay, there on the Cologne side at the mouth of the canal. I learned to free dive. I learned a little bit about scuba diving. I learned a whole lot about humping around in the jungle. And it was very, very miserable as well. Difficult, dangerous snakes and bugs. And, if I were to say we spent 3 weeks out in the jungle, how do you imagine that looked? Like, what did we do at night? How did we sleep at night? Did we string up hammocks? Did we pitch a tent or anything just like that? No, no, we would just stop wherever we were and lay down on the ground and go to sleep, or at least try to. And out there in the jungle at night, everything comes alive. And so it's crazy, crazy to be laying on the jungle floor in the middle of the night trying to sleep and feel something large go and crawl across your face and go, and that was very humbling for sure, without a doubt, Paul Bradley. That was a humbling environment. And not only that, it was very miserable. It froze to death at night because it's so humid and you're laying on the ground and that wet ground just convects the heat away from your body. And very, very miserable. But learned a lot about how to operate in a jungle environment. I learned that I didn't like camping in the jungle in Panama, and I don't think I've ever been actually camping like on the ground in Panama since then. Been a couple times I've spent nights out in the jungle, but I always bring a hammock and a dry change of clothes because that is miserable. No fun whatsoever. So I got a chance to go helo casting, and that was interesting. This is my buddy Chernowskis. We got some time off, and we would go snorkeling and free diving out there. This is the breakwater right off of the entrance to the Panama Canal on the Cologne side. When somebody had wrecked a yacht out there that we went out and looked at. Very memorable, some real good memories that sort of cemented my belief that Panama was a great place way back in 1988. That was fun. Okay, the next one is Ranger School. Ranger School is well, at that time, it was 61 days long, divided into 4 phases. You had city phase, which was Benning phase, or city phase, Benning phase, mountain phase, jungle phase, and desert phase. So I guess that's 5 phases, but city phase was only a week. And now you understand Ranger School. Here's what I gotta explain to you. When somebody says they're a ranger, they could mean one of 2 things. They could mean that they were a member of the Ranger Regiment, which is a special operations unit. It's the Army's elite infantry unit. Or they could mean that they have been to Ranger School, which is a leadership course. And that's all. It's just named after their special operations unit of the Rangers. But somebody can call themselves a Ranger if they've been to the school, even though they were never in the special operations unit. So you could be a cook in the 82nd Airborne or something and go to Ranger School and call yourself a Ranger for the rest of your life. But only those who have actually lived it in the unit, in my opinion, are the real Rangers. A lot of people would beg to differ, but of course anybody who's been a part of the unit says that the Ranger School is 61 days and the Ranger unit is a way of life. So in the Ranger School, the idea behind that leadership course is to train you to lead men in combat. And the way that they train you to lead men in combat is by trying to approximate the stress of combat, but they can't do it by shooting at you. They can't do it by killing your buddies off. So how do you increase the stress level as high as possible to inure men to the kind of stress they're going to face when they go to combat? Well, they do it in several ways. Number 1, they take away your food. Number 2, they take away your sleep. Number 3, they grade you on everything that you do. And so it's very physically taxing, very exhausting course. It's a 61-day gut check. You're marching or patrolling through the woods with a rucksack on that weighs 40, 50 pounds. And you are doing that for 12 to 15 kilometers every day. And you're getting 2 hours sleep a night at a maximum. Many nights you get less than that. So only 2 hours, the most you get is 2 hours sleep a night for 61 days. And you get 1 meal per day for 61 days. And then there's a guy standing there with a clipboard everywhere you go, and he's watching you and he's grading you on everything you do. And if you don't measure up, if you don't perform, then they kick you out or they recycle you back to day 1. Either one of those things is almost a fate worse than death. About 60 to 70% of the guys who go through the Ranger School course end up being recycled at some point and having to start over. That's part of their ways to stress you out, is you think that you've got a month left and you do something wrong and you get kicked back to day 1 and now you've got, another 61 days to go. I knew a guy who was literally in his last 3 days of Ranger School and got recycled back to day 1. There were guys who spent 6 months in Ranger School, kept getting recycled, or injured or whatever. And so that is always hanging over your head like the sword of Damocles, that you're going to get recycled. And again, you're doing this on very little sleep, very little food. You get to the point where you are like hallucinating, literally, because you've had so little sleep. You're fantasizing about food the way you would fantasize about a girl. Oh my gosh, just to unwrap that Twinkie, and you get so you start making recipes and lists of all the food that your mom used to make and that you can't wait to eat again when you get out of Ranger School. It is a very, very strenuous 61 days. Now, I was unbelievably fortunate in that I graduated from Ranger School. I went straight through. I did not get recycled when I went through. So I did the 61 days and that was it. I even had a break in between because I went over Christmas. And so we had like a 2-week break off where I got to eat and recover, which was very good because I got super sick at the end of the first mountain phase, to the point where I had pneumonia and I couldn't eat and I was getting weaker and weaker and I almost just fell out. And then right as I was about to, get kicked out, we went on our 2-week break and I had time to recover my strength sufficiently until the second half. At the end of the second half of my Ranger School, in desert phase, which was in Dugway Proving Grounds, Utah. So it was really more like Arctic phase at that point because it was February and it was super, super cold and snowy and it was really bad. Everybody got dysentery because sewage got into our water supply, and everybody got sick to the point where they shut everything down for the last several days of Ranger School because they thought people were going to start dying. They thought it was something in our food, so they kept trying to replace our food, but they weren't doing anything about the water, and the sewage was in the water. And so everybody just kept getting sicker and sicker. It was really, really bad. When I got out of Ranger School, I looked like I had just survived a Turkish prison camp. I have somewhere here a photograph of what that looked like. If I could find oh, here it is. I think it's in this book, Black Hawk Down. I keep some old pictures of myself from my time in the Army. I think it's in here. Maybe not. Oh yeah, here they are. Yeah, here's a picture of me when I had just got out of Ranger School. Look how skinny I was. I looked like I just got out of a Turkish prison camp. That was actually about a month after I got out too, so I'd been eating like a banshee after I got out. That's the skinniest I've ever. I was 18 years old, almost not, I guess 19 years old. I was 19 years old and I weighed 120 pounds when I got out of Ranger School. So I would not like to do that again. Ranger School dramatically affected not only my physical state, but my mental and emotional state as well, because I was just so sleep deprived. I would fall asleep anytime I stopped moving. Like I would literally fall asleep at stoplights. I'd be driving home from work and I'd stop at a stoplight and just be out cold. And when the person behind me started honking, when the light turned green, I'd wake up and then I'd keep driving. And that happened for a long time. I very rarely after that, the rest of my time in the military, slept more than 4 hours at a stretch. It just seemed so luxurious to sleep for 4 hours. Like, who cares? That obviously is not real good for you. And so physically, my body was weaker than it had been going in for probably 2 years after I got out of Ranger School. But the idea is that they put you under that kind of stress to approximate the stress of combat. And once you've been through that, then when you get to combat, you can function. And in fact, that was the case. When I ended up going to combat, I was able to function much better than I think I would have been if I had not been through Ranger School first. So again, it took me about 2 years to totally recover, but the mental fortitude that I got from going through that kind of difficulty and hardship has stayed with me for the rest of my life and has helped me be successful no matter what I have set my mind to ever since then. When I was getting out of the military, I thought, man, I've kind of wasted 4 years because I just learned how to kill people and blow things up really well, but there's not much of a market for that in the civilian world. And then what I've realized since then, though, is that the intestinal fortitude and the strength of character that I built by going through all of that was so valuable. And the can-do attitude. I mean, when on graduation day, I was so tired and so worn out, so exhausted this day, the day I graduated from Ranger School, that I just didn't even care about that Ranger tab that they were pinning on me. I was like, yeah, whatever. But I do remember distinctly thinking, if I just accomplish that, there is nothing I can't do. There is nothing I can't do. Does the Army do CS gas training? Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, later on in my Ranger career, I was the designated NBC officer. Now they would call it CBRNE. I was a nuclear, biological, and chemical officer, went to NBC school, and was the guy who did the CS training in the gas chamber for our guys that have to go through periodically. Is this the same Ranger outfit as seen in the movie Saving Private Ryan? Yes, it is. It is also the same Ranger outfit that is seen in the movie Black Hawk Down. If you've seen this movie, then that was my unit. And 6 of the guys that died in Black Hawk Down were friends of mine, guys that I trained with and worked with. I got out of the unit about a year and a little over a year before they went to Somalia. But a lot of those guys were guys that I served with, for sure. So that was definitely a memorable experience going through Ranger School, one that I will never forget, and one that you could not pay me $1 million to repeat. I'd rather never do that again if I could get away with it, okay? So Ranger School, all right? The next memorable thing I just wanted to point out was, the military is a lot of intense boredom, waiting for the word, running to places and then waiting in line to get into where you ran to. A lot of really stupid kind of just BS you got to put up with. A lot of, bad leadership and hurry up and wait. That's right. And so that's not very likable at all. I didn't enjoy that one bit. Having somebody else in charge of all my time, owning me essentially. Connie says Ranger School was even harder than being married to her. Well, it certainly prepared me for being married to Connie. That's for sure. And if I figured if I could, that's the reason I tell her that I keep her picture on my phone, because if I can survive this, then I can survive anything. I'm kidding. That's a joke. Ranger School was much harder than being married to a Norwegian woman, for sure. She's wonderful. She's great. And our 30th anniversary is coming up in about a week. So that's going to be cool. Now, so there's a lot of hurry up and wait. There's a lot of just, stupid stuff you got to put up with being in the military that I absolutely loathed, absolutely despised. And there's a lot of things that are really miserable, painful. Being out in the cold, training in the rain, in the snow, sleeping on the ground, just being very uncomfortable. And if you can't handle being uncomfortable like that, you're never going to make it in the military. But that doesn't make it, even if you can handle it, it doesn't make it any more fun, right? But there were those times, about 10% of my time in the military, when you are hanging out the back door of a Chinook helicopter, or when you are parachuting out of a C-130, or when you're hanging on the bottom of a spy's rigging, or something like that. You're right in the middle of a live fire exercise, and there's explosions and rockets and mortars and all sorts of things blowing up. When you think, yeah, this is what I signed up for. And that idea of hanging out the back of a helicopter, or better yet, riding around on the side of a helicopter, this is a some training we did on little birds. Those are Hughes 500 helicopters, and they had a little bench seat on either side of the helicopter. You just run up and sit down on that thing, and they take off with you hanging on like a cowboy on the outside of the helicopter, nothing between you and the ground. And those things are flying full out and banking, hard left and right, and you're just holding on for all you got. And I tell you what, man, that is an adrenaline rush like nothing else. That is the most fun you can have with your clothes on right there. And I wouldn't give that up for anything. That was an absolutely wonderful, wonderful time to be in the military. But to get to that, you got to put up with a whole bunch of this. This is, me after I'm all suited up, ready for a parachute jump. And you have to lay there on the floor and wait for the aircraft, wait for everybody else to get their act together. And sometimes you wait there 5, 6, 7 hours, and you're just like, come on, just wasting your time. But that's what you have to go through to get to that fun stuff. So there were a lot of memorable moments. I remember one in particular when we were doing some training at a MOUT site. That's a military operations in urban terrain, MOUT site. And they had live role players as bad guys that were down there. They had set a bunch of tires on fire and laid out all kinds of, concertina wire. And they were shooting flares up in the air. And it looked like a real war zone. And I was in charge of fast roping my team in out of a Black Hawk helicopter. And it was late at night, middle of the night. We come hammering in there in this Black Hawk as fast as it possibly can go. And I'm hanging out the door of the Black Hawk, hanging onto the rope, getting ready to kick the rope out to drop it down onto the ground so the guys can slide down onto the ground. And that helicopter just flared really hard coming in 90 feet off the deck, and there were machine guns going off, and the door gunners are lighting everything up. And I can just remember my adrenaline was so high and just thinking, yeah, that is what I signed up for. This is what it's all about. And, as a 19-year-old kid, that's a lot of fun. You can have a real good time doing that. Says, someone forgot to feed your cat. Oh, no, you hear it. It's not my cat. That's my grandbaby upstairs crying. Unfortunately, she takes her nap right about the time I do my live every day, so she doesn't like to go to sleep. Now, the last thing, most memorable moment of my career was the invasion of Panama. December 20th, 1989, just a couple days ago, 34 years and 2 days ago, we parachuted into Panama. This is my squad here. You can see me there, the second from the right, with the M203 grenade launcher. And we're taking a picture next to a hole in the wall that was made by one of those grenade launchers when we were taking over that building. That building was like a barracks for a military like academy called the Escuela de General Tomás Herrera. And the guys in there were called Herreranos. And so it was like the West Point for Panama. And when we showed up, they were not able to get to their weapons because the guy that had the key to the arms room ran away. And so they were all hiding in this building. And 7 of us came up to clear this building and ended up taking 217 prisoners out of this building between 7 guys. And so that was obviously a very exciting few moments of the invasion. And the next morning, we took our photograph, and this has become sort of an iconic photograph of the invasion of Panama that you will actually see around all around here. The guy on the far left of the picture is a guy named Bohannon, and that was his first jump in the regiment. He had only jumped in airborne school, so he had 5 parachute jumps up to that point in airborne school, and his 6th parachute jump was into combat with bullets flying, and he had never actually landed in an airplane before. He had taken off 6 times, but every time he jumped out, and so he had never landed. And after we got done with this invasion, he got to go home on leave, and he flew home, and as they were coming in for a landing, he was gripping the seat armrests, and the lady next to him said, "Oh, have you never flown before?" And he said, "No, ma'am, I've flown plenty. I've just never landed before." And so that was kind of funny. You know, the invasion of Panama was a pivotal time in my life. It really made me want to come back to Panama, and eventually led to me living in Panama. This is my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Kelly. He was a legendary figure in the U.S. Army Rangers, mostly for his foul mouth. And the guy inside that car right there is oh geez, I just spaced on his last name. He was our company commander, and he went on to become the general of all of JSOC general. And I'm completely spacing on his name at the moment. A little distracted by the baby crying up there. While we were there, we didn't get to bathe for the first several days, and we were getting pretty ripe. So there was a swimming pool at Rio Hato, and we kind of took over the swimming pool, and everybody went skinny dipping to wash off some of the crud. I also ended up carrying a AK-47 for a couple days because one of my privates had landed on his weapon and had bent the barrel of the weapon so it wasn't functional. So I took an AK and carried it around for a while. And this is what skinny Chuck Holton looked like.
Is Ellie bothering you? Do
Yeah.
you need her out? Okay.
It'd be great if she was in our room or something. I also did one mission where I got pretty dehydrated. It was a behind the enemy lines mission to recover a pallet of Jeeps and motorcycles that were lost, that they actually got dropped outside of the airfield. We had to go recover it. And we had to patrol through the jungle, very stressful, very dangerous. And then I ended up driving a special ops Jeep back onto the airfield. On the way back, I accidentally jumped that Jeep across the Pan American Highway, which at that time was only 2 lanes, but there was a field like here, and then an embankment that dropped down about, 10 feet. And there was a 2-lane road, and then the embankment came up on the other side. But it was real tall grass, and I was driving super fast and was all worried I was about to get shot, and just had the pedal to the metal going about 40 miles an hour in that Jeep, and I never even saw the road coming up, and I hit that embankment and actually did a Dukes of Hazzard all the way across the Pan American Highway. And if you don't believe me, you can go back and ask some of the guys who were there, because I think I'm probably the only person ever to jump a Jeep across the Pan American Highway. Nowadays, it's at least 4 lanes with a median in the middle. That'd be a lot harder to do. At the end of that mission, I was so dehydrated that I asked them to give me an IV to just rehydrate some. This is in the office of a Panamanian PDF captain who had been killed in the invasion. And so I'm wearing his hat there while I get my IV. I was not injured or anything like that. I just knew that that was the fastest way to rehydrate. And when you're really, really, really dehydrated and exhausted, there's nothing like an IV to get you back feeling better. It's just like turning an air conditioner on inside your body. It's like, just really fast. And so we used to do that from time to time. And so this is my private, Jamie Chester, and he was very new during the invasion as well. Was one of the guys in my charge, and he remains a friend to this day. He ended up naming his son after me. So that's it for my 5 most memorable moments in the U.S. Army Rangers. And I just thought that would be a fun way to do the last broadcast before Christmas. I hope that you will have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. Let's see. Always falls on the woman to take care of the baby. Chuck would never survive a pregnancy. I am not going to argue with that. Argue about that. Although I may not have ever been pregnant, but I did have the flu once, and that's almost the same thing for a guy. So I can just hear all the hate mail I'm going to get for saying that. I'm just joking. So Mason went and got the baby. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. And I hope your 2024 is far better than your 2023 was, even if it was a great year as it was for me. Was I ever at Fort Lewis? Yes, I did a bunch of training up there with the 2nd Ranger Battalion and went skiing. Actually did ski training up there and winter survival training up at Fort Lewis. Actually at a place called, what was that called? It was another camp that was just outside of Fort Lewis up near Mount Rainier. This time next year, we're going to be hosting a Ranger reunion for the 35th remembrance of the invasion of Panama. We're going to be down in Panama probably for that. And I hope that it will be a well-attended event. Last time we did it 5 years ago was, 4 years ago, was a very, very good event. And so if you'd like to get a hold of me, if you have any questions for me, please go to hotzoneholton@gmail.com. Please, right now, just do me a favor, go down and hit the like button down there. And if you have not subscribed yet, for some reason, when I look at the analytics, a lot of you still have not subscribed, maybe because you're watching on TV or something, but you could go subscribe down there, and that would help a lot to keep showing this to people around the world. We have a lot of people that come in from all over the place to see these things, and we're going to keep reporting on Israel, Ukraine, and any other war and disaster around the world, especially the greatest disaster globally right now, which is the immigration crisis. And so stay tuned. God bless you all. Have a Merry Christmas. We'll see you later.